the ability to share your comments and opinions with us about the pending decision to opt out of House Bill 581, the homestead exemption, and we are, pursuant to state law, going to begin with a brief Finance Department presentation.
Good evening. Thank you, Chair Shook, Mohammed Bala, City of Atlanta, Department of Finance. Today we will talk about HB 581 and the intent for the city to opt out. The City of Atlanta is announcing its decision to opt out of the statewide homestead exemption. To give everybody's background, there was a ballot question that read, shall the Constitution of Georgia be amended so as to authorize the General Assembly to provide by general law for a statewide homestead exemption that serves to limit increases in the assessed value of homesteads, but which any county, consolidated government, municipality, or local system may opt out of upon the completion of certain procedures. These procedures include these public hearings and public notices, which have all happened. HB 581 contains multiple provisions related to property taxes, and actually good provisions. They grant statewide homestead exemptions that limit the increases in taxable value of homes to no more than the inflation rate, allows local governments to elect to opt out of the homestead exemption, and authorizes most local governments within the homestead exemption to levy a new sales tax. Since the City of Atlanta already has the municipal option sales tax, it cannot levy a property tax. The other thing to note is that the City of Atlanta already has a base floating exemption that was enacted in 2019 through HB 820 and approved by the citizens of Atlanta. That House bill allows for a 2.6% increase annually based to qualified homeowners who applied for the homestead exemption and the floating exemption. So the city's decision reflects its commitment to maintaining local control and ensuring that the residents benefit from the programs tailored to Atlanta's unique needs. We feel that our floating exemption is, in fact, as good as or better than the state's floating exemption. One thing to note, since the city enacted its floating rate exemption in 2019, we have not raised our millage rate from 2019 to 2022. The exception was the increase in 2023, which coincided with a recalibration of the solid waste fees of the City of Atlanta. The City of Atlanta was ordered by court to reconstruct the solid waste fees so that the common goods provided by the Department of Public Works for solid waste services needed to be absorbed by the general fund. And in construct, we reduced the solid waste fees, but we had to increase the differential and pick it up here in the general fund mill rate. And the city intends to keep that mill rate flat. This is the final public hearing that we've had on this issue. So that concludes our remarks. Thank you, Council Member.
All right, thank you. I'm going to declare the public hearing open. Our first speaker is Ms. Alexander, and I see others of you are signing up, but Ms. Alexander, you're up. All public speakers have 2 minutes. That's pursuant to state law.
Good evening. Nice to see Ms. Bakhtiari. Would have been nice to see you yesterday at the Cabbagetown meeting saying that this will be happening. That's what I'm wondering. I mean, the first time I heard about this hearing was last Friday because a neighbor found it on Nextdoor. And that's probably a reason why nobody really is here, because nobody knows about it. So why didn't we get a flyer in the mail, like a simple one, didn't need to be color, that this is happening? I think it's of interest to every homeowner. The ones I asked, they were sick, they couldn't come. I've been living in Cabbagetown for 25 years. I'm a public school teacher. In 25 years, with all the increase in taxes, nothing really has gotten better in the schools. The outcome, kids don't graduate. The demands of the kids get lower and lower because they have anxiety, they're sick, all those other things. Teachers, I mean, my taxes have increased 5 times since 2000. My salary not even increased twice. So I think this needs to be happening again. We need to be informed as citizens. Nobody knew in the neighborhood yesterday. I was the only one telling that to our president of the neighborhood, and she was like, oh my God, she didn't even know about this. Nobody knows about it. And I think people need to have a little bit more time to gather so more people can show up here and voice their opinion. I don't really like that my taxes go up a lot every year. Okay, 2 minutes over? Okay, but nice to see you, Leah.
Thank you. Next up is Nathaniel Dyer.
Hello, it's weird that a city like this with so much construction is going on for vacant apartments, and you have homeless, and then you have people facing being displaced. But then we have this, you want to opt out. Instead of focusing on the problems, I'm going to just make some suggestions. There can be a tiered homestead exemption where you make adjustments to where it's income-based. And it can take care of low, middle income homeowners. People making under $50,000 annually can receive larger exemptions. Number 2, enhanced senior and long-time homeowner protections. Let's say someone who's 65 or older can have a freeze. There's the homestead exemption expansion with a cap where you can do those type of things too. Localized tax revenue adjustments, where put these developers on the hook, big business. You'll give $40 million to one entity and then just leave the community vibing for pennies. 2.6. Let's see, community investment from tax revenue. I mean, these are possibilities, but you want to provide one option where you're digging ground all over the city. You have homeless camps everywhere. Legacy residents are being taxed to death. The school system, you got 1, 2, let's see, Ishay Collins is on here, Matt Westmore. People come from the school board who did their damage, and now they're here making decisions. Table this. Look at this room. There are not enough voices in here there are some powerful voices, the people that showed up, but you need to take more of a swath of how people feel. We're tired of the taxes with little to no services, and then no compromise when it comes to, whether you should raise them or lower them. You do not hold big business accountable, and this is really a big business money grab. You're working on behalf of the billionaires who own a lot of these properties. May I have 15 more seconds?
No, actually, you have 30 more. That was a
Thank you, I appreciate
30-second warning.
Okay, I appreciate it. The people who benefit are the people who have invested in those communities that are being gentrified. If they lock everything down with their 4,000 or whatever the portfolio they have in their portfolio, this locks them in. They benefit. Not so much the residents. New homeowners are going to be, it's going to be problematic for them. The seniors, they may feel comfortable about the 2.6, but when the taxes of the school system knock them out, then they're gone. So I would say pause this. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Deborah Lance Clark.
Good evening.
Evening.
I've been a resident of the city of Atlanta since 1984, have lived in the same home, and watched my taxes increase quite a bit. I have a specific question for the group tonight. I was provided last evening with the official statement regarding House Bill 581. I'd like to read that, and then I have a follow-up question about it. HB 581's intent to provide statewide relief is commendable, but Atlanta's diverse communities require more nuanced and equitable policies. By opting out, we maintain a framework that directly benefits our residents while supporting the city's growth and prosperity. I don't know what that means. I would ask that you please provide 3 specific examples of how that language would be carried out in practice.
You still have time, and we'll have get an answer to the question, but I don't want to intrude on your time.
That's what I want to know.
All right.
I guess I would also echo the comments of the first speaker that we only found out about this right before last weekend.
Thank you, understood. Mr. Bala, our CFO.
Sure. One thing that I wanted to reiterate is that the city already has a base floating exemption, which allows homeowners, primary homeowners, who apply for the homestead exemption and go through Fulton County's process to have their properties locked in at that rate and only grow at 2.6% year over year. If you looked at the state's proposed assessment, which tracks the CPI, CPI at the state level was 9.8, 11.7, 3.6, and 2.6 the last 4 years. In all of those cases, the city of Atlanta's 2.6 is a better option. So ours would have been the one that we put in place anyway. We think that once you apply for that base floating exemption, lock in your base rate that only grows at 2.6% a year through that homestead exemption application, that allows for a predictable growth in property taxes that aligns with the costs of the city of Atlanta. And it's worked well for us to the fact that we haven't had any mill rate increases with the exception of 2023 when we had to increase it for solid waste purposes, offset by that solid waste reduction.
I'm not familiar with that particular
Yes,
cap,
we-
and I'm not sure I see how it has been reflected in my tax bill. Is this new?
No, it's been around since 2019.
And we had to apply for this?
Correct. You have to apply for this.
This is the first I've heard of having to reapply for a homestead exemption. And in fact, my homestead exemption went down between 2023 and 2024, which caused my property taxes to go up thousands of dollars, even though the value remained static.
So all of those applications for the homestead exemptions are actually handled at the county level, but we're happy to send all the notifications we've sent them to the council members about how the citizens can go into Fulton County and make sure that they are automatically inputted into this exemption. Even the state's exemption will be individuals have to apply for a homestead to get that exemption.
Yeah, this is the first I've heard of it.
Okay, well, I'll be sure to sidebar with you afterwards and we can exchange notes so I can make sure that you have the right information.
And we have till April 1st.
You have till April 1st, yes.
I have a question.
Well, hang on. I'm going to make sure. Are you done?
I think I'm done.
Okay, thank you. Well, come on up. You got to be on the mic, be on the record.
Okay. Yeah, before you all move forward, I guess this is my question to somebody over there. Have you done research on the number of LLCs in the communities across Atlanta? Because those aren't homeowners. And in a lot of those situations, they have rehabbed a home. Just say you have a crack house, but then you have a 600,000+ home right beside it. That's part of the inflation that a lot of the communities are bearing the brunt of this, the residents are. So, you're saying that you're going to benefit, but in the end, it's your residents who own their homes, not under LLCs. So, we're not really going to be the benefactor. I think we're being used as pawns for their benefit. And because that stabilizes the market for them. If you lock it in, then they can make future projections of where they're going to go next. And I'd just like to say one more thing. What about alternatives? Is this the only option? You can look at even going lower for residents who have lived in their homes for 15+ years. We need to see some possibilities, make it more dynamic to where we can say, okay, you all have put some thought into it. And it seems like it was handed down from big business and you all were told to pony it to us. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Ms. Bakhtiari.
It was my understanding that this legislation was adopted by the state sometime last year, and then it only made it into our hopper, what, 2 weeks ago?
It made it into our hopper January 1.
Okay. So we've had a short lead time. And can you, CFO, can you also, one, let me also apologize to my constituent. I had a meeting, I circulate, and I sent one of my teammates, one of my folks there, and if they didn't talk about it, then I will have words with him. But I was presenting at a different neighborhood. I have 17 neighborhood meetings a month, so I try to rotate. But I hear you, and I will improve. But my understanding is, could you better explain the timeline that we are currently on for this bill and the decision?
Yeah, so we have to notify the state the decision to opt out by a certain date, by March 1st. So in that process of assessing whether we would opt in or opt out, and went through that process, come to a decision where we are doing it.
Thank you. And it is my understanding that APS has no homestead exemption, and they are trying to opt out and not actually allow for any exemption to take place.
That is my
Yes,
understanding.
taxes whatsoever. So that's another thing we should name. APS has the opportunity to also opt into this. They do not have a floating homestead exemption. They don't have an exemption the way that the city does. And I also believe that they should be held accountable because, as you named before, the school taxes that are going up, APS should opt into this because they currently have no exemption whatsoever.
And they account for about 50% of the
Yep.
taxes.
Could you say that again?
So on anybody's residential tax bill, just so for people's City of Atlanta residents, half of your tax bill is APS, about 25% is for the city, and about 25% is for the county.
And does the county currently have any exemption in place?
The county does have a floating exemption in place.
What is their cap?
Their cap is 3%.
So higher than ours?
Yes.
Okay. And you said if we were to opt into this, it would actually raise, the cap could go up to 3.2, 3.5%?
Well, yeah. So the states is different than ours.
Okay.
It has some nuances to it. The reason why we decided to opt out is because the states expect the inflation, and ours is standard at 2.6%. But as inflation fluctuates and it goes up and down, and in years where it's 0 or 1, and then it pops back up to 8 and 11% like it did in 2022, it would leave the city in a very difficult situation to have to do millage increases in those off years to offset whatever the differences are back and forth. And it makes it very complex and convoluted to overlay two floating exemptions on top of each other. We feel like our floating exemption is one that works well for our citizenry.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Wait, hang on. If you have a comment, you have to come up on the mic.
I'm heavily involved with the APS situation. That's what I call it. But they recently, they claimed that they didn't raise the millage rate, right? But if the property taxes are steadily going up, that's not really an advantage. So the residents are caught up in a situation where, where's the benefit? When are our voices going to be heard? When are we going to be looked out for?
Well, okay, let me try to answer that. And I'll be blunt. APS has never met a backdoor property tax increase they didn't like.
Yeah.
Okay? We're not APS. We have no authority over regulating what they charge. We charge half of what they charge. We don't have 17 choices. We have 2, right? The choice in front of us is if we opt out of the current situation, that's a huge windfall for City of Atlanta property tax payers. That's our choice. I mean, it's not really a choice. We're trying to help people out.
Well, what I say to that is, you've done a great job of helping businesses, big business, to the tune of millions, trillions. And that's what's happening in Divine Cities, Washington Parks, all of those areas where school closures are being faced. So, you pretend that school system is one thing and city is another.
Well, let's not pretend. It's what it is.
Well, the reality is you have former board members, or at least close to five board members. You are pretty much glued. Now, you may pretend that you're not connected, but the same entities help support you all during your campaign.
Okay.
And of course, with the development around in the area, they need schools to fail to succeed to help property values or to come in and purchase those. And then you all on the other end help them out with bonds and certain allocations that allow them to not be so stressed on.
Well, you're talking about the Fulton County Development Authority, but I'm not going to,
Yeah,
this isn't a debate. Ms. Bakhtiari.
I was going to say, well, you're also bringing up Fulton County Development Authority that we fight with constantly because they give giant tax breaks to organizations like Amazon or Twitter, X, formerly known as Twitter. And we fight that. Fulton County Development Authority, in my opinion, should not be allowed to operate within the city of Atlanta limits. We have a development authority, but they undercut the city regularly. In addition, our city charter prevents us from being able to do anything around education, including their taxes. We're separate branches of government. Yes, there's natural overlap because we have to work together for the betterment of the city, but in terms of taxes and money and everything else, I push APS constantly because of what they're doing to my seniors. I understand your frustration, but.
Oh, it's not frustration, just pointing it out. And I'll just say, I end on this note. While you all are fighting, it's the billionaires or the investors who are benefiting. I mean, they're the puppet masters. So while you can create some distractions or make it seem like things aren't working in cohesion, the ultimate goal is high taxes, development, and they do what they want. So while you all fight and the residents suffer, there's a benefit at the end of it. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Yes, ma'am, and then we're going to close it out.
I understand what you're saying about the floating exemption capping and increased property assessments at 2.6%. But if that still doesn't provide the city of Atlanta with the money it feels it needs for its budget, aren't you still able to raise the millage rate and thereby increase my taxes anyway? That's my
Yes.
first
So
question.
that is it's a good question, and the answer is yes. And every municipality and construct has that opportunity. Even with the state's floating rate exemption, they can always go back and increase the millage rate. And that's why I like to show this slide here, because we've done a good job of keeping our mill rate steady over the years. The difference was in 2023 when we increased it to offset reductions in the solid waste services that were court ordered us to do that, said you can't charge these general services to individual homeowners. You would have to put them in your general mill assessment and reduce it out of individual homeowners. In the past, to let you know, during that settlement with the courts, the city was charging vacant properties, multifamily properties, other properties, common good charges and frontage fees, and we stopped doing that. And we had to since put them on a general fund assessment. But other than that, you can see on a pro forma basis, it's been the same since 2019. And that's what we intend to do. We intend to have our general fund mill not increase year over year.
I still didn't hear an answer to my original question where I asked for 3 examples of how the official statement would play out in practice.
It's going to be a lower property tax rate for everybody.
But not necessarily a lower millage rate, although you hope to keep it steady.
I mean, I'd love to, yeah, I would like to answer all your questions, but I think there's a lot more of them that are much nuanced because.
Yeah, I'm trying to, there's the wording in here about, nuances and equitable policies and so forth, but it's not specific enough for me to fully understand what you mean by that.
Yeah, I mean, what we're saying is that our floating, in a nutshell, our floating exemption is a good program that has been put in place. The state used this type of model to implement a statewide exemption that is, I think, in good construct, but we feel like our exemption is better for the citizens of Atlanta, and there's no need to overlay two exemptions on top of each other, which would have happened if we opted in. A lot of municipalities do not have a base floating exemption. They don't have anything. The school board doesn't have one. There's a lot of counties and a lot of jurisdictions that don't have one. The other thing that the state's option allowed for was also an increase in sales tax for municipalities to make up the difference as it increased sales tax. We already have a municipal option sales tax. That would now be something that the city of Atlanta would be able to take advantage of. So these are the nuances that we were discussing and talking about. But, you know, I do think, and I urge all residents to apply. You have to be proactive in applying for homestead exemptions, coordinating with the Cobb County or Fulton County to make sure that you qualify for all the exemptions that are out there, because there are numerous exemptions. There's exemptions for seniors. There's exemptions for seniors.
I'll get that one next year.
Yeah, there's exemptions for veterans. There's exemptions for widows of first responders who died on the line of duty. So there's numerous exemptions that are out there, and we urge all citizens to, you know, go through the exemption list and see which ones apply to them and take full advantage of those exemptions.
How was this one communicated? It's been in effect since 2019?
It has been in effect since 2019.
How was it communicated? I don't think it was with my property tax mailing.
I'm not sure, but I do know that it's on our city's website, but and the county's website, and all of the exemption handouts that the county provides, it's in there. But
I would think it would need to be in the literature that is
and
mailed
we are, yeah,
directly
we're
to
working
the
on a communication plan with
taxpayer
council.
every year. That's what we know we can expect from the taxing authority, is to
Correct.
have that communication.
And you're right, and we're collaborating to push out as much information we can about, hey, here's what you need to know.
Yeah, I
Here's
know
what
it
you need
costs
to
money.
know to apply.
Put a stamp on a letter and print it and mail it. I
Well-
realize that, but
Okay,
thank you.
all right, thank you. All right, if there's no one else, and just let me say, you know, all of us up here were private citizens long before we ended up back here. So I want to thank everyone for coming out on a cold, nasty night, and for letting us hear your thoughts. We are adjourned.
What are the next steps, the next meeting?